This is Booking It to Financial Freedom, show number 29.
You have to think about on your deathbed, what are you going to be grateful for and what are you going to regret? I doubt you're going to be grateful that you were working 80 hours a week. You're going to regret that you didn't have more time to spend with your family or travel or whatever it is you enjoy.
I ask myself more and more often, can I afford to put this off? It's not, I'll get to it eventually, but can I afford not to take that trip? Can I afford not to go climb that mountain? Can I afford not to do this or that?
What if you don't even make it to retirement? That's what happened to my mom and stepdad. He passed away 3 years ago, and they kept saying, well, after you fully retire, we will do this. We're going to buy a camper. We're going to travel around. Yeah. I mean, he didn't even make it to 70, and they didn't get to do any of that.
Who's to say we're going to be around next year, you know? Or able to. Say I get in a car crash and I'm not able to walk again, and I'll be like, man, I had like 50 opportunities to do that, and I never did it.
Welcome to Booking It to Financial Freedom, where we explore literature from some of the most successful experts in their field to help you build a blueprint for personal growth and financial freedom. Join us as we examine a new book every month and break down key concepts to help you get out of the rat race and on track to start building a life better than you ever imagined.
Hey everyone, I'm your host, Amanda Schneider, realtor and investor, and I'm here with my co-host and teammate, Jamie Booth. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Amanda, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I am great. I've been in a good routine as far as working out and stuff, so I'm getting past the really horrible, like sore and tired time frame, like when you jump back into it. So, yeah, I've been kind of crushing it. Been on my schedule. I was attempting to do the hard 75 for those people who out there who know that is, but it's just I kept getting it wasn't the fact that I wasn't doing it. Mm-hmm. It was the one time I had to reset after like day 12. It was because I was just so busy I couldn't get it to squeeze the second workout in. So I don't know, it's not the fact that I don't feel like I can't do it. It's just like I don't know if my lifestyle is going to allow me to accomplish it at any given time. So
that's part of being a real estate agent, because I think was that the day you had the 6.5 hour inspection.
Yeah, well, yep, there was that day, and then trying to write a contract until like 9 o'clock at night. Those days just kind of like bite you in the butt.
Yep,
so
for sure,
it's not about lack of willpower to do it. It's just sometimes it can't happen for reasons of out of my control,
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. I've tried that once and I had the exact same experience with it. It's just hard to get the 2 workouts. Those were the hardest ones.
Yeah. Other than that though, like I've been hitting the gym hard and hitting the trail hard and all that stuff, getting ready to go to climb Pikes Peak for the first time next week. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, it'll be your first time?
First time ever.
That's
yeah.
Awesome. Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Well, cause it's one of those things where I've been trying to go with my buddy for like the last 3 years, and something always happens with him or something like that. So I'm like, I am going this year, no matter what, whether I have to go by myself, I don't care. I'm going. So I'm on one of my goals this year. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Be excited to hear about it.
Yeah. About what have you been up to these days?
Still playing tennis.
Yeah.
So doing a bunch of that and, working like we always do. So Lindsay and I are going on a small little vacation to Florida here in a few days. He's got a potential business opportunity with a friend. So I'm just, tagging along.
Yeah.
So it's good.
It's always good.
Yeah.
I love being able to travel when it's tied to business.
Yeah. So. And then you can write it off too. It's even better. But I'm really excited to get into this book. And I feel like we probably say this every time, but we love each of the books we read. There's a reason for that. But this one for me really was life-changing in the way I thought about what I wanted to do for my life, what I wanted like kind of retirement to look like, all of those things. And so when I first read this book, it would have been like 2012 or 2013. I was a contractor in Afghanistan, and I had such a boring job. It was just like QCing things. And so all day I was just in front of the computer. So I'd listen to tons of books and podcasts, and this was one. And the aha moment came on that he talks a lot, and we'll discuss it, but he talks a lot about these mini retirements where instead of waiting until you're 65 to do an official retirement, you can just take these chunks of time off in your life. So I actually did that. I did 6 months in Afghanistan, and then I went to Germany, and I lived there for 4 to 5 months and went to a language school with a friend of mine. But by staying overseas that entire year, I was able to take a huge tax benefit from the first 6 months that I did work in Afghanistan. I think it's the first, at that time, it was like the first $100,000 you make, you can, it's tax-free when you're overseas. So that saved me like $25,000 in taxes. So all of that money I was able to basically use or put towards the time I was in Germany. So I used a lot of these kind of principles that he talks about in here that we'll discuss.
Yeah, I knew I was looking forward to reading and going over the book again, but once I dove back into it, I was like, oh, this stuff, it's just it's so motivating because it changes your perspective on what your life can be, and again, we're talking about the new rich in the book, deep dive, what that looks like.
Yeah.
But it's just, it opens up a lot of possibilities to the way you can live your life and completely change everything for you if you were able to implement some of these things. And a lot of it's kind of tailored towards people who kind of work in the corporate world. But despite that, there's still just so many different tactics that you can employ to free up your time and improve your lifestyle. So
yeah,
I love it. Absolutely love it. Got me super motivated to start doing some other things. So
yeah,
can't wait to dig into it.
And there is a section kind of more in the middle, not anything we're going to cover today, but where you kind of have to read it with knowing that this hasn't been updated since 2009. Yeah. So it was written, I think, in 2008 or 2007, and then he updated in 2009. So he gives a lot of, because you could almost take some of this and like implement the plans that he talks about to some degree, but he talks a lot about using virtual assistants, a lot of websites to help you, etc. It's very possible that those websites don't even exist. But to your point, what you were saying.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about because there's a ton of resources that he names and references and apps and stuff like that. So my train of thought is that, if those things existed back then, they've either got new versions of them or some other product has taken over, and become something better to fill that space. So if some of that stuff's not out there, I'm sure you can find more relevant material to apply today.
Absolutely. He at least gives you the resources or the thought pattern that you need to think about how to implement these things. But obviously some of the things he talks about, it's Googleable. If you need a virtual assistant or you need this or that, you can Google all of that. But just know that there's, especially if you're listening to it on audiobook, there's a couple chapters where it's just like resource after resource. It's like you could probably skip a couple of those chapters. And to me, what we're going to cover today is the best chapter, because this is really what gets you motivated and kind of changes your thinking on life. So cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump into it. He kind of opens this book with basically letting the listener or the readers know why it is you even need this book. And he talks about a couple like FAQs right in the beginning to dispel some fears that people may have. So again, this book is really about not having to just work 40 hours a week, for 40 years of your life, doing a normal retirement of, waiting till you're 65, living off of a pension, et cetera. It's being able to live now and enjoy what you have now. So he wants you to know that you don't have to quit your job and you don't have to be a risk taker to do these things. He actually talks about ways that you can maybe have conversations with your boss about being able to work more remotely for longer periods of time, et cetera. He also talks about you don't have to be single or a 20-something. He's got lots of examples in the book of people who do it with families and people who are older. And travel doesn't have to be your thing. That's kind of what this book revolves around a bit, because it's Tim Ferriss's thing, but it doesn't have to be that. It's truly about just enjoying whatever it is you enjoy in life. Yeah.
I think it boils down to the question of, what does rich look like to you? And everybody wants to be rich, right? Everybody wants to have plenty of money. But you have to ask yourself, what does that money bring to you, right? Exactly. What does it do for you? It gives you the ability to have options. It gives you the ability to travel, to be mobile. And then what was the other one? And I can't remember.
Yeah.
But, that's what being rich gives you. So this basically kind of redefines what being rich is. Do you have to have a $500,000 a year job to do certain things? No, you don't. You can do it with much less and by employing some of the tactics that he has here in the book. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And he talks a lot about how a lot of places in the world, their cost of living is so much lower than ours. So, if travel is your thing and you want to go overseas, there's a lot of places where you can live and, work remotely at a much reduced cost of living.
Like when I was in Korea, I took a month-long vacation into Thailand, and I was completely flabbergasted how cheap it was there. I spent less than $1,000 the entire month. And I was just,
crazy.
you know, having adventure after adventure, traveling all over the country. So yeah, if you, you know, had a job where you could work remotely from Thailand for like 2 or 3 months,
Yeah.
you would probably save so much money by doing that. It's just insane.
Yeah, that's the thing. So you alluded to it a little bit in the beginning, but he has what he calls the new rich. He refers to, and you'll see it in the book as NR. So his definition is individuals who prioritize time and mobility over traditional wealth. They seek to create a lifestyle that allows them to live the life on their terms without being tied down to a 9-to-5 job or a specific location.
Yep.
So as we're chatting about that, that's really what it means is the freedom.
Yeah.
To
Oh, that was the other
where-
part of that. What I was trying to say, time. So
yes.
mobility, time, and options. That's what being rich gives you.
Yes.
And being living under the definition of the new rich, this is the stuff that affords you more of all of that. So
Yeah, because what's also really interesting in this book is like it kind of starts with if you are someone that, you know, traditionally just works in an office 9-to-5 job, like maybe you start by asking for like 1 day a week where you can work remotely and you continue to build up. You prove to your boss that you're actually more productive when you're outside the office. You know, there's a lot less distractions. And then when you're fully remote, you can actually employ a lot of resources to help you get your work done because obviously you're not, you know, checking in anywhere. So they don't know if you're physically, you know, at your desk from 9 to 5. So if you hire a virtual assistant or find a way to do it more efficiently.
I saw one example I thought was really cool. Is like if you get paid $20 an hour to do a certain task, but if you can pay someone $7 an hour to do the same thing, why in the world wouldn't you do it? Like it's just like now you're still making $13 an hour, but you basically have all of your time free. So
Yes.
it's like 100% of your time, and you have to ask your question: how valuable is, you know, the time that you have and, you know, that you have left on planet Earth? Because for most of us, it's not a whole lot. So time is usually our most valuable resource, and, you know, being able to, you know, have more of that to do what you want to, like travel, go surfing or scuba diving or whatever, that's more important than money for a lot of people. There was another example I saw where, you know, you have to ask, it was 2 different people. Who do you think is more rich? It was like an investment broker or whatever who was making $500,000 a year, but he was working 80 plus hours a week, just to try to save up enough money to live the lifestyle he wants at the end of his life. So just to retire. Or the other person who makes $40,000 a year, but he literally only works for 4 hours a week and has the flexibility to go do whatever he wants for almost all of his time. So, you know, is the guy that makes $500,000 richer, or the guy that has all the time in the world? Is he richer?
Yes.
And he's still doing a lot of the same things that the rich guy couldn't do or can do, but doesn't do it because he doesn't have the time.
Yeah.
Right. So
no, that's a great example. And obviously those numbers and everything is going to be different for everyone and how we want to spend our time. But you have to think about on your deathbed, what are you going to be grateful for and what are you going to regret? I doubt you're going to be grateful that you were working 80 hours a week. You're going to regret that you didn't have more time to spend with your family or travel or whatever it is you enjoy.
Pretty much the universal answer of people on their deathbed is like, what do you wish you had? You know, more time,
more quality time,
more time with your family, more time to do whatever, or taking the time to go climb a mountain when you never did it. So regret.
And it just dawned on me because I'm just thinking about like, you know, some of the stories that you and I share with each other, and you tell me about an awesome hike that you went on and an awesome view and blah, blah, blah. Like those are the kind of stories that you tell at a dinner party. You're rarely ever telling exciting stories about when you were sitting in an office, you know,
right.
Like those aren't the things you remember.
Yeah.
So.
I checked 463 emails last week.
Exactly. Yeah. Those are the things you're complaining about.
Yep.
He does have some questions in here to just kind of ask yourself to, and we've been talking about it already, but just like, what if, you know, retirement isn't an option? What if you don't even make it to retirement? And that's kind of what happened to, I've brought it up before, but that's what happened to my mom and stepdad. He passed away 3 years ago, and they kept saying, well, after you fully retire, we will do this. We're going to buy a camper. We're going to travel around.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't even make it to 70, and they didn't get to do any of that.
Yeah, and I'm glad that I do this with you and I read these books, because I ask myself more and more often, like, you know, can I afford to put this off? It's not, I'll get to it eventually, but can I afford not to take that trip? Can I afford not to go climb that mountain? Can I afford not to do this or that? Because, it's just, like the example with my buddy, we put off climbing Pikes Peak for like 3 years. Who's to say we're going to be around next year, or able to say I get in a car crash and I'm not able to walk again. And I'll be like, man, I had like 50 opportunities to do that and I never did it. And now here I am and I can't do it. So
Another thing he brings up in the book is if you're somebody who's worked your whole life until you're 65 and then one day all of a sudden you're not working, you're now retired, do you really think you're going to understand how to enjoy life and spend your time? You're not, because you've worked so hard for so long that that's all you know. So then to just shut it off and all of a sudden be enjoying life. So instead, finding that balance of working enough to support your lifestyle, but taking these mini vacations and things like that and learning how to spend your free time outside of work is really important.
If someone wants to hear a scary statistic, I'll give it to you right now. I think I was talking to somebody about life insurance and all this other stuff. The insurance companies know that the average person lives for about 2 years after they retire. Ugh. So if you're sitting there waiting to hit 65 to pile up all your money, and then you think that you're going to go do all these things that you were going to do, wanted to do all your life, statistically, you have a couple years to live after you retire. Mm-hmm. So, take that with, whatever you want.
Right.
But, insurance companies, they make a lot of money because they're right on statistics. Yeah. And statistically speaking, you don't have a lot of time after you retire.
Yeah. And that is absolutely a nightmare to me. Like, to know that would happen and that I lived a life that was completely unfulfilling. So, and he asked too, do you really need to work like a slave to live like a millionaire? And he gives example after example in this book of people who are living, again, overseas is a lot cheaper in some places. So these people who are living almost like millionaires on just a basic, run-of-the-mill salary. These people probably, some of his examples, they probably make less than $100,000 a year, but they moved to another country and they're now working remotely, or they've built a business that they can work remotely, but they're living like kings because of the places that they're living in and they're experiencing another culture. So I find that amazing, because that is something, and Lindsay and I have been talking a lot more since reading this book of what do we want our life to look like? Because we've got our kind of net worth number in mind. And so over the last couple of years, we've been working towards that, but at what sacrifice?
Yeah, I think that's another thing. I don't know if he puts it in a book or it was something. I was kind of looking at some other reviews of the book too, but, defining basically, working to automate everything to get to the point where the passive income flow that you have, it supports the lifestyle of your definition of rich, right? So if that's being able to live on a beach, scuba dive every day, if all of the stuff that you've done, all of the tactics that you've employed in this book to get all of your stuff automated and all, if you're able to do that, live that lifestyle, then, that most people would assume that you're rich. Yes. Yeah.
He gives a story in the book of this guy who owned a corporation. He went on vacation in say Mexico, and his fisherman guide, they were just chatting, and this, guy that owns the corporation was asking him kind of about his business. And the guy's like, I do this, I fish for a couple hours, and then I go home and I spend time with my family, and then we sit on the beach and we do all this stuff, like describing basically what most people would think of as a perfect day. And the corporation guy was like, oh, you know what, but I could help you build this business, and we'd franchise and we'd do all this. And we'd, the fisherman's like, well, how long would that take? And he's like, oh, probably, 15, 20 years at the most. And he's like, but then what would I do? And he's like, well, then you could buy a small little house in Mexico and you could spend the day with your family sitting on the beach. And the whole point of the story is, but that is my life. I'm not a millionaire, but this is already how I spend my day. So why would I want to put all that extra time away from my family just to be where I am already? So
yeah, it's a really good example. I like that one.
One thing I do really like about this book too is that it's not about sacrifice. So I think sometimes people think, I've got to scrimp and save and I've got to do all this, but Tim Ferriss is like, no, I want you. This is not about not being able to drink your daily glass of wine to save $5. I want you to be able to do all of that. Yeah. It's what you said is defining what makes you happy, and then finding a way to fund that lifestyle. Yeah,
I love that point 100%. Yeah, it has nothing to do with sacrificing your lifestyle. It's about building a system that allows you to live the lifestyle you want, but still have the freedom to enjoy it.
Yep. And the way he has this book set up is he uses the acronym DEAL. So it's set up into definition, elimination, automation, and liberation. So these are basically the 4 steps that can help you get to this lifestyle. So the first one is definition. So really sitting down and thinking about what your ideal lifestyle is. Like we talked about, what does rich mean to you? It's not about the money. It's about how you can live your life. And then elimination is not only probably eliminating some physical things in your life that is kind of baggage, but also eliminating or delegating tasks and finding people that can help you, kind of the who, not how, help you do what you need to do so that you're not the one working all the time.
Yep.
And then automation, and automating as much of your work and income as possible. And I think virtual assistants were just kind of becoming a thing when he wrote this, and now,
I love
everywhere.
I love the stories he was talking about when he got his assistant from India. I just loved that. It was just, the way he talked about it and the way that she was responding to his emails and stuff like that. I love that. And then the other part, he deep dives on how to avoid emails and all that stuff. It's just, they're effective. And they're great tactics, but I just kind of love the way he approached some of it, but in the way he tells the story in the book, how he's able to work around some of this time-saving stuff. So I love some of those parts there.
No, I agree. It's definitely, I hope people are obviously listening to our podcast, but you really need to be reading the book too to get all those little nuances because he's got a lot of great tips. And then the last part is obviously liberation. So liberating yourself from that 9-to-5 work routine and really being able to be the one that he calls it lifestyle by design. So you're deciding what your lifestyle looks like. You're the one designing it. So, and then he gives some things that he has done in his own life. So throughout the book, he uses a lot of examples from other people. So you don't always necessarily know if it's something he went through or just someone that he interviewed, but these are specific Tim Ferris things that he's done with the principles from this book.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. It's mind blowing what this guy has done with his life, because of, he's constantly thinking outside the box and doing all these crazy things all over the place. Yeah. It's just looking at his bio is incredible.
Yeah. And if you don't listen to his podcast, I would recommend listening to his podcast too. He's just such a unique individual. But he was a Princeton University lecturer, and he literally was lecturing on these types of things on this book. So that was pretty cool. He broke the Guinness World Record in tango. So he talks about it in the book, but it only took him like so many months to become this amazing tango dancer. And then he broke the Guinness Book of World Records. He speaks 6 different languages, and that's pretty amazing too. He doesn't go into it much in this book, but if you read his blog or listen to his podcast, he talks a lot about how he does it, but he's basically just found a way to learn languages very quickly. So that's pretty cool. You can read the book to kind of go through the rest of his things, but he's done a lot of things in a short amount of time and he's lived all over the world.
Well, the one I really liked, the story that I liked was how he became the national Chinese kickboxing champion, kickboxing champion. And he trained for I don't know. It was a matter of weeks.
Yeah, it wasn't very long.
It was a matter of weeks, but what he did is he employed this tactic that, it was legal, but no one was using it as a tactic, and then he won every single match and become a champion.
He was thinking about getting him out of bounds or something.
Yeah, he was using this tactic where if you knocked your opponent out, I think it was 3 times, then you won by default. And so he saw that was in the rules and figured out ways to do it, and was able to clean sweep that competition to get the gold medal. But all the other thing he did was he did this super crazy aggressive weight cutting thing.
Yes.
Where he lost 30 pounds because the weigh-in was a couple days before the competition. So he weighed in at 30 pounds less than what his fighting. So he was fighting guys that were 30 pounds smaller than he was. And then he was employing this tactic that no one used. And I guess everybody was up in arms at the time, but now it just evolved the sport to where that's a real strategy that people try to employ all the time. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
He also has a book called The 4-Hour Body. So he has done all kinds of experiments on his own body with nutrition and what he ingests and what he doesn't eat and blah, blah, blah. So that's a really interesting book too, very along the same principles of basically only need 4 hours a week to have like a shredded body. So yeah. Okay.
I need that because I spend way too much time in the gym.
I have read it, and you have to be very strict with what you eat. So basically he is super, super strict for 6 days a week. And then the seventh day he lets himself eat whatever. And that's just, for me, that would just be too much of a messing with my mind to do that. But it worked for him. Okay. So the way we're going to structure these next couple podcasts is today we're going to focus on the D for definition of that acronym deal. So that's all we're going to talk. It's a really long chapter. So we're going to chat about that. And then I think it maybe even, let me look at our notes real quick. We might even spill over into the next episode, potentially. There's just a lot in here. He's really just building up the case for why we all need to do this and how we can start to take the initial steps to do this. So we've already talked about some of them, the principles of the new rich. So he compares them to what he calls people who are deferrers and then the new rich. So the deferrers are the people that are deferring their retirement, like basically what society teaches us: find a stable job, work until you're 65, et cetera.
Do all the, your IRA, all that stuff. Like all you're doing is deferring your wealth so that you can spend it at a later time.
Yes.
Yep.
And so he has a lot of comparisons, which I think are really important. And I just kind of want us to talk through this. So the deferrals are people who basically say they want to work for themselves. A lot of them are, not all of them. They obviously work in offices and stuff. But then the new rich, they want others to work for them. So I love this because I think a lot of what we've talked about in this podcast is being entrepreneurs and, obviously investing, et cetera. But it's not so much even about working for yourself. It's getting others to work for you. It's taking it a step farther. And how much can I delegate to others to free up my time?
Yeah, it's important, and it's important for your growth too. Is like, even now, I'm at the point in my real estate career where I'm like, if I get too much, if I want to really, grow my potential, there is definitely 100%. There's a point where you have to start hiring help if you're going to grow.
Sure.
Like you don't have enough bandwidth as an individual agent to continue to go past a certain point. So, being able to, use that as an example.
Right. And so the deferrers might say, well, the goal is that I want to work when I want to. But a new rich person would say to prevent work for work's sake. So it's not about, I have the freedom to work, at 6 p.m. at night if I want, instead of going to the office at 9 a.m. It's truly taking out those inefficiencies and only doing what needs to be done to get you the income you need to live off of. Completely different mindset. And then the deferrers would also say, the goal is to retire early or to retire young, where the new rich would say it's to distribute recovery periods. So these are those mini retirements that we're talking about. Finding ways that you can take a year off. You can maybe work remotely or maybe not work at all for that year, travel, come back, refresh. Yeah,
I was going to say, like the mini retirement, you can spend, if you've dialed in your work week to where you've automated most of the stuff and you really are truly only working a handful of hours a week, that can easily take place in a place like Thailand or Peru or something like that. So yeah, you're on an extended vacation, but you're still being productive because you're only concentrating on the most important tasks that it keeps to tape your income going. So
yeah, and like I said, it's just finding ways to do that. Maybe every couple years or whatever kind of feeds your soul. And that's why I gave the example of what I did back in like 2013 is I just understood that by purely staying overseas, I would save myself $25,000 in taxes. And so I wasn't really sacrificing a whole lot of income. And I had an amazing time and an amazing experience in another country, so trying to think outside of the box.
Yeah.
So again, the deferrers would say they work to be able to buy all of the things that they want to have, where the new rich says that it's to do all of the things you want to do and be all the things you want to be. So you really have to define, and this is going to be an individual thing, but how many toys and how many things do you truly need to be happy? I know, like for instance, for Lindsay, he really wants to get a dirt bike, and for him that would be super fulfilling. So great, that's a thing we have, but it doesn't mean we also have to have $1 million home and all of this and that. It's like defining the couple toys and the things that will make you happy rather than just accumulating all the stuff that ends up just sitting there anyway because you don't have time to use it because you're working to pay for them.
Yeah. And I think this is a good example, or there's a good example out there where like, like Grant Cardone or some of these other guys where they break down where people want to save up for like 30 years so they can buy a yacht or save 30 years so they can buy a plane, when there's actually ways that you could just lease that plane. Like there's one example I saw back in the day where the guy wanted to buy a plane for his business trips. And then the guy asked, well, how many times do you fly for a business trip? And the guy was like, oh, maybe like 6 times a year. He's like, well, why do you need to buy the plane? You can lease it for like $2,000 a trip or something like that. You're still living the same lifestyle as if you own the plane, but you're not paying near as much to do it. So,
right. Yeah.
So stuff like that. And then I think there's another example where he talked about how the family they went on a cruise, or they lived a lifestyle off a yacht, just sailing around Europe for like 6 months. And at the end of the day, their kids were being educated. They were doing all this traveling, all this adventuring, and all this stuff. And it cost them like $18,000 out of pocket when it was all said and done.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's kind of getting over that stigma of having to show the world what your wealth is by the things you own, but instead show them by the experiences that you have. So,
yeah.
So another thing with the deferrers is they want to be the boss instead of the employee. They want to be the one in charge, but the new rich say that they don't want to be the boss or the employee, but the owner. So they want to be the one that, is basically overall owning the company and getting the rewards, but not doing the work.
Yeah, exactly.
Finding someone else to run their business. And the deferrers say they want to have more, which is why they continue to work, where the new rich says to have more quality time and less clutter. So like we were just talking about, kind of really minimalizing what you need in life to be happy. And he gives an example here. He says you spent 2 weeks negotiating your new Infinity with the dealership and got $10,000 off. That's great. Does your life have a purpose now that you've saved yourself that $10,000? Are you contributing anything useful to the world, or just shuffling papers, banging on the keyboard, living your life, he says, from one drunken existence on the weekend to the next? But it's such a great point.
Yeah, I had to giggle at this one too, though, because this is like in a direct contradictory to Ramit and I Will Teach You to Be Rich, where they do talk a lot of negotiation tactics and stuff like that. So it was like, I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's got to be what the person is comfortable with. If you are somebody who is more comfortable with what Ramit teaches, and that works for you, then great. But I think the whole point of that example is like, don't quibble off a few. I mean, it's $10,000. I get it. But is that really going to give you a new purpose in life? Are you that much happier now that you have your Infinity and you save $10,000? Like, that does nothing to your life. Your life is still the same. Yeah,
happiness is not, but having more of everything. It's about being happy with what you have. So
having the fulfillment. So the deferrers again say to have the freedom from doing what they dislike, where the new rich say to have freedom from doing that which you dislike, but also the freedom and resolve to pursue your dreams without reverting to work for work's sake. So, a lot of people, they're like, I'm just going to keep working, so eventually I'll be done and I won't ever have to do this again. Where the new rich is like, no, let's fuel our passion and maybe even make our passion be what brings us in income. So, one thing he talks about too is the freedom multiplier, that money is multiplied in practical value depending on the number of things that you control in your life. So what you do, when you do it, it's exactly what you were saying. Freedom
this
of
is
time.
an example.
Yeah. But I love that idea of thinking it as a freedom multiplier instead. And then who are the new rich? So he kind of takes a little bit of time to define who these type of people are. And again, there's going to be so many different definitions depending on what your goals are in life and what it takes for you to be fulfilled in life. But one example he says is the employee who rearranges his schedule and negotiates a remote work agreement to achieve 90% of the results in 1/10 of the time. So it's freeing up the place that he is and the time that he has. So that's somebody who is the new rich. And then you've also got the business owner who eliminates the least profitable customers and projects and outsources all operations entirely and travels the world collecting Word documents, all while working remotely on a website.
Yeah, there was a really good example he uses in the book here where I don't know if it was his own, I think it was his own business at one point, but he realized that, again, Pareto's, law, that they're, he noticed that there was a handful of his customers that were making them the most money, but those customers were also not giving him a headache. They were just ordering the product on a regular basis. They weren't calling up, complaining, tying up all his time. So he had those. And then there was the other 20% that were just killing him.
Yes.
And then he just took a step back and said, okay, do I even need these guys that are killing all of my time? So he literally just cut out all of the bad customers, regardless of the fact that he kind of may have lost money on it. Actually, I think he ended up making more money by cutting out some of those customers. Yes. And then, the rest of his time was free. So it was like completely changed how he was able to do business with just shuffling around a few of the customers he was dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, you and I've had plenty of conversations like that too, of the customers who take up the majority of our time but are giving the least return. Like, does it just make sense to cut ties with them? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
that is definitely something to think about.
It's just always applying the 80-20. No matter what the topic is, there's always an 80-20 rule that you can apply to that. It's hard though. It's really hard to, just using us as an example is cutting ties with somebody that could get you a commission, because you're like, well, I'm losing that one commission. But ultimately, if you can cut ties with that person, if they're taking up a lot of your time, you can hopefully get
3 or 4 more.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully.
That's the hopes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like to leave listeners with just some questions and things to really think about, especially as we're talking about doing potentially some major life changes.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the questions that Tim Ferris poses is what would you do if there were no way you could fail? So if you were 10 times smarter than the rest of the world, what would you do?
That's a great question to ask,
Yeah.
That's a deep one.
If there were no boundaries, if you didn't have to worry about taking care of your family or earning an income or anything like that, where would you want to go? And I like to take it a step further and what is the first thing that pops into your head? Don't overthink this. What's the first thing? And the first thing that pops up is what you need to start striving towards. If it's a place, if it's a way of life, whatever it is. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. And I think what most people think is, when they do pose that question on themselves, they're like, am I going to, they're probably not going to come to the conclusion that they're going to completely change the world with all this other, crazy stuff. It's going to be something much more simple that'll make them happy,
Yes. Something that truly is within their grasp. It's just they've been using excuses to not do it, Yeah, I agree. And what does being entail? So not doing, but actually being. So you want to convert some of these being into doing to make it actionable. So I want to be, a
guitarist.
Yeah, just anything. What do you have to do?
A surfer.
Yeah. What do you have to do to get to that point? So, and even just with tennis, I have my practices scheduled every week, et cetera. So to be a better tennis player, I have to do this. So converting that being into doing, and what does that look like?
And now you're a tennis player.
And now I'm an amazing tennis player. Okay. And so then he wants you to narrow it down. So once you've kind of thought about what would I love to do? What does that look like? What are the 4 dreams that would change it all? So he likes to see you break it down into a 6-month timeline. What could I do in 6 months? And then what could I do in a year? So you can kind of use this for both if you want, setting, shorter and then longer term goals. But what are 4 dreams that would change it all for you? What does that look like? And then you got to just determine the costs of these dreams and calculate your target monthly income. So that's like we were talking about with the relative income.
Yeah, relative versus what was it? Actual income.
So, and this sounds super simple, and I honestly think it is. It's just a matter of whether you're going to action what you've written down, but deciding what you want to do, what that looks like, and what it costs.
Yeah, and I think what most people will come to a realization is that it's not going to cost them as much as they think it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very motivating, especially if you lay it out. You're like, this is what I need. I need to make the X amount of money to sustain this lifestyle, and be like, whoa, that's actually achievable.
Yes.
And then you're super motivated to make it happen.
Yeah.
And remember to keep it on a short timeline to force yourself to take action.
Yes. Exactly.
Once you've decided you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah. And don't let analysis paralysis stop you. I know I can get overly bogged down in the details of not knowing everything. So if my dream is to go live in Belize, like you were talking about in the beginning of the show, I don't know what the cost of living is. I don't know this. I don't know that. Like, just write it down, and then you can do some research a little bit later as far as like actual costs, but just don't let analysis paralysis.
Or actually go do it. Like say you want to go to, you maybe want to live in Thailand for 3 months. Well, just go to Thailand for a month and see what happens.
Yeah.
Then you'll know, and then you come back, and then you can strategize and go from there. So
no, that's great. Cool. You want to take us out?
Yeah, for sure. Great episode. And, as always, we appreciate all the support that we have out there for the channel. And if you liked what you heard, please share, like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube, all that good stuff. And we are looking forward to bringing you the next episode.
Yeah. See you guys
all
then.
right. Later.